With all of the singing, vacuum riding, and scenery chewing, it can be easy to forget that the Sanderson sisters are actually the antagonists of Hocus Pocus. Crazy, I know. Though that may be in the benefit of this cult classic. Their antics catapulted them into the cultural zeitgeist for what feels like all of time. And so let's honor these wonderfully wicked sisters by going through 25 of the things that you might have missed on your previous viewings of Hocus Pocus. Spoilers are inbound, but it's been about 29 years, so if you somehow missed any of these before, say hi to Patrick Starr for me. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. We can't blame a movie for wanting to set the mood, can we? And for Hocus Pocus, that mood is Halloween with a capital H. However, Halloween 1993 just so happened to be on a Sunday, meaning Alex, Max, and Danny wouldn't be at school. It also lacked the full moon required for the spell. If we do a little math, it was actually 9 years too late, or about 7 years too early. A good rule of thumb is that every 19 years, Halloween will inevitably land on a full moon. So sadly, those twisted sisters should have remained in an unliving slumber. Before we leave the first scene, I'd like to dissect a bit because it's a little strange. To start, why would this story be being told to a group of almost adult high schoolers who live in and presumably know the story of Salem already? On top of that, the teacher calls out Max for seemingly no reason. He was simply writing quietly to himself. Beyond this teacher's strange behavior though, did you notice the tie-dye shirt that Max wears in this scene? It has the same color scheme as that of the three Sanderson sisters. You can have that bonus fact for free. Taking some liberties with history is something that pretty much any work of fiction has to do. And as audience members, we can suspend our disbelief for those small errors where they arise. But the Sanderson sisters being tried and killed for being witches exactly 5 months after the witch trials officially ended is just too perfect for us to not mention. In May of 1693, everyone accused of witchcraft was pardoned and released in Salem. Now you could look at this as a historical inaccuracy, but I prefer to see it like this. The Sandersons were so evil, so notoriously nightmarish, that the town decided to give it one more go, with real witches this time. Ash Williams himself would be jealous of Winifred's spellbook. Wrapped in human skin, complete with a living eye, this is the source and sum of all of her most wicked spells, a lot of which seem to just be illnesses common to people in the 17th century. These include spells to cause aching bones, boils, and even cholera, which makes sense once you put the ideas of witches and curses into context. In a world devoid of medical science, these ailments could easily spell death for even the hardiest of individuals, which makes you kinda wonder just how dangerous these sisters really are after the prevalent use of penicillin. When the treacherous trio meet who they assume to be their master, they find that he has married Medusa, while in fact this satanic couple is actually played by Gary and Penny Marshall. Penny was famously known as the Laverne in Laverne and Shirley, and you may not recognize Gary Marshall from in front of the camera, but he has been really busy behind it, being the director of countless titles, Pretty Woman being one. These two juggernauts play side by side in a scene that is only mildly better than Luke and Leia's kiss in Empire Strikes Back. Portraying a century-old witch can come with its drawbacks, one being the use of language to insult your fellow co-stars. Well, Bette Midler took this to the next level. Her archaic insults are all from the mind and thesaurus that she had on set. So next time someone calls you a maggoty malfeasant, be honored, because it's a title that goes way back. Who could forget that memorable mummified miscreant? Do you remember that satisfying scene of him coughing up moths? Well, that entire thing was for real. Doug Jones really held live moths in his mouth so that the scene could feel as real as possible. Of course, he had a sort of dental dam in place as to not swallow the little actors. But here's a small bonus thing. His original line had him curse at Winifred in a way that a 17th century witch may blush. But Mr. Jones felt uncomfortable with the line. He felt that his period-accurate tirade was better suited for the child-focused audience of the film. A regular heartthrob, or lack thereof. If you found yourself longing to get lost in the empty eyes of a decaying corpse, or pondered how his sewn lips would feel against yours, then you're not alone. In fact, you'd be feeling the way that director Kenny Ortega wanted you to feel. He planned on Billy being an attractive zombie, and we're glad that he succeeded. Plus, it helped to dissuade the instant distrust that we as audience members often have towards those who are, how you say, not quite dead. We know you miss this fact because it's not actually in the movie anymore. Someone somewhere has cursed us by cutting a dance sequence featuring Billy Butcherson himself. It may seem like an odd addition now, but Doug Jones actually got the role of Billy by dancing in his audition. What could have been the new Thriller now only lives in the hopes and broken dreams of us fans. But later we will see just how much actually changed in the making of Hocus Pocus that transformed it into the cult classic we have today. It wouldn't be a horror movie unless there was a stranger popping up in a reflection, and Hocus Pocus is no exception. Filming in an environment where you cannot control every factor is a difficult task for anyone, so these filmmakers deserve praise for simply putting together such a beloved movie. However, if you look closely in the window when Max and Allison are in the kitchen, you can sort of make out the camera crew. It's not a movie killer by any means, like the film is still going to be awesome, but now that we've pointed it out, you won't be able to unsee it. You're welcome. It's hard to miss all the Disney princess vibes that the aptly named Sarah Sanderson is emanating. From her overall Sleeping Beauty-like look, to her soft siren song that calls forth children like birds to Snow White. Depending on how you feel about that song, you may be pleasantly surprised to learn that Sarah Jessica Parker sang that herself. No voice double needed, unlike someone else on the list. Speaking of Sarah Jessica Parker, her role in this movie can be seen as the culmination of a family's long history and ties to those accused of being witches. In other words, her 10th great-grandmother, Esther Elwell, was accused of witch-like behavior, and the place where she was accused? No other than Salem, Massachusetts. Luckily, this had a happy ending as the Salem witch trials was coming to an end by the time she was accused. It's kinda spooky how connected to history this movie really is. Hocus Pocus had a shoestring budget of about $28 million. For comparison, Richie Rich, just a year later, had $40 million, and the majority of that 28 went to just getting the actors involved. So when it came time for costuming scenes like the dance, Kenny Ortega had a brilliant idea. He asked and rented any and all costumes left over from other Disney productions. This was a lot cheaper than having to make every individual piece, and the added benefit of making the crowd look like an authentic collection of random people. Have you ever stayed up so long that you start seeing double? Being a YouTuber, I do it literally all the time. Well, rub that sleep out of your eyes because you aren't here. Unless you are. How would I know? Watch these children frolicking about the Sanderson sisters as they trick or treat. Notice anything familiar? Look at that busy little bee flying back and forth to pollinate the block. When you have limited hours with limited people on limited budget, small things like this seem to be a lot more viable. The green dress that Winifred wears is nothing if not meticulously planned and purposefully coordinated to accentuate her larger-than-life personality. A few of these details are the symbols lining her abdomen. They are runes and circles that, when combined, mean absolutely nothing. And that's the point. They are meant to seem like they hold some ancient meaning, but they're simply runes with some extra lines and a few circles. Now her socks, however, those are purposely reminiscent of those worn in The Wizard of Oz. While we're on Winifred, did you catch that subtle nod to Bette Midler's career? No? When she jumps on stage and introduces herself, it is a direct rip from the Bette Midler project Gypsy, which was filming at the time. It wouldn't be released until December of that year though, so you could argue that a little magic helped Winifred see months into the future and make that reference possible. Choreography is an important key to flesh out the reality of a story. How the characters move and interact with their environment helps ground the entire experience. For example, did you notice how each of the Sanderson sisters was riding her broom? Well, the cast and crew sure did. In fact, each sister had her very own style of flying that mirrored how each performer drove. In an interview with Sci-Fi Wire, Mary herself, played by Kathy Najimy, said Sarah was like very front forward, so she would hold it close. She continues, I was like very 10 and 2 while I was driving, so Peggy was like, that's how you'll fly. Also just speculating, but during Sarah's singing to the children of Salem, she lounges on the broom like a bed. This could be further strengthening her Disney princess motifs. Kenny Ortega is no stranger to working with Disney. In fact, he went on to direct a major staple of Disney TV movies. That's right, the man behind this spooky season staple is also responsible for the High School Musical franchise, as well as The Descendants a whole decade later. So that leads to an obvious question. Why can't we have that zombie dance from earlier, even if it is just a rehash of we're all in this together? Who do I have to bring back from the dead to make this happen? Thackeray Binks was transfigured into a sleek black cat 300 years before the events of the story take place. But before that feisty feline was 80 yards into life, the original actor was muted. Much like David Prowse in Star Wars before him, Sean Murray's voice is missing from the movie entirely. Now he was speaking on film, but his voice was dubbed over by Jason Marsden of Goofy movie fame. But Sean was a good sport about the whole thing. The producers needed a more 1600s voice, and his was just a bit too contemporary. Now they both share the role and legacy of that protective older brother. Okay, so imagine a world where there's no Hocus Pocus. Got it in your head? Good. Because that was almost the destiny of our beloved world. The original movie was almost called Halloween House, starring a cast of 12-year-olds. Obviously this version never came to light, but the one that we know and love could have ended up looking a lot different. While the story only went through some minor changes, the overall focus was much more nefarious than what we saw. Not to say that we wouldn't love to see a darker Hocus Pocus, with almost Mel Brooks-like humor, following the antics of evil witches in the now 21st century, and with Disney Plus having the R-rated Deadpool, who knows, maybe my wish will come true after all someday. For those who were watching the TV ads for Hocus Pocus back in 1993, you might have seen one where Mary was eyeing a kid hungrily in a supermarket. While this scene did not make it into the movie, it also reveals a little behind-the-scenes knowledge. At first, Hocus Pocus was going to be about the Sanderson sisters first, following them through the majority of the movie. But it was decided that this would probably not be the most suitable for kids, and the focus was redirected to be about Max, Allison, and Danny. That's not all the change though. See, we almost got an entirely different cast altogether, and some of the choices would have made the whole movie just feel a little weird. Picture a 19-year-old Leonardo DiCaprio on the phone with an agent of some sort, talking about the possibility of this future Oscar winner portraying Max in Hocus Pocus. And that's about as much as we know for certain with this, as the story splits in two directions from there. On one side, Ortega says he was fully aware of DiCaprio's commitment to another project when they spoke, meaning he could never have taken the role in the first place. However, DiCaprio recalls being offered an absurd amount of money to play the part, but turned it down in hopes of landing a role in another movie he was looking at. That other movie? What's Eating Gilbert Grape? In either case, we got the best possible outcome, as who better could have portrayed our lovable virgin hero than Omri Katz? Though it brings up a question as to if they dubbed DiCaprio's voice. Though he was still a fresh face in the industry, he was far from obscure, whereas Katz was largely an unknown. There is a world somewhere in the vastest of realities where we watch DiCaprio light a black flame, speaking in Katz's voice, but I digress. Not even the Sanderson sisters themselves were spared. Could you even imagine another person adorning the crooked smile and rotten intentions that Najimy brought to life? Well, at some point the pleasure would have fallen on Rosie O'Donnell, but the role of Mary seemed rather dark, so she turned it down. Another blessing in disguise for us, the audience. Not meaning that O'Donnell couldn't have done a great job, mind you, but Najimy just found her stride playing the sister. In fact, her crooked mouth and affinity for sniffing, that came from the mind of Najimy herself. Plus, O'Donnell, like DiCaprio, was available for many more successful movies after that. When it comes to playing wicked witches, Najimy is just in a league of her own. So, no harm, no foul. Winifred is inarguably the leader of the three sisters. She seems the most adept at magic and has the recipe sort of memorized. What helped sell this leadership was Midler's uncanny stage presence. Every scene she was in feels like a love letter to the hamminess that she brought to Winifred's performance. However, when looking for people to portray the putrid party pooper, David Kirshner was envisioning Cloris Leachman, not because of her 1978 Hansel and Gretel, playing the evil child-hunting witch, but from Young Frankenstein. How far this went, though, is tough to say. But at some point, Bette Midler won over the crew, the audience, and the rest is history. Still would have liked to have seen it, though. Did someone mention Young Frankenstein? Because that tap dancing scene almost never happened, but that's a story for another video. No, Hocus Pocus has its very own almost cut musical segment, besides Billy's. And it's arguably the most famous scene in the entire movie. Kirshner, who also wrote the book the movie was based on, was afraid that it would cut the tension too much and ruin the entire film. Luckily, this opinion was not shared by all, because wow was he wrong. He enjoys the scene now, but let's detail why he was very wrong. Nothing personal, Mr. Kirshner, it's all in good sport. Midler's creeping vocals dancing on the melody sounds wonderful to our ears. But remember, this is an actual spell that she's casting. Its quality is its danger. Supported by the backup of Sarah and Mary, Winifred feels absolutely in control. And that final cackling laugh at the end is just the cherry on top. This injected fun and energy while keeping the stakes super high. And lastly on the list, Hocus Pocus couldn't get the audience's focus. When it was first released, it had a tough start. Being in the middle of the summer, it was actually out of season. And being a lower budget film meant that it wasn't stacked with every big name at the time. It was a Disney horror Jason movie, so it kneecapped a swath of its own demographic with the subject matter. And probably the most damning was it having to compete with Free Willy of all things, culminating in a not hugely successful opening. But like the Rocky Horror Picture Show before it, all the movie needed was time. Time to be remembered and appreciated. And time for fans like us to rewatch it and find all the little gags and details we missed as kids. Time enough for this diamond in the rough to polish and become the jewel of Halloween that it is today. That's it, guys and ghouls, and all those beyond. The sun is coming up and we've got to go. There is so much more that we want to talk about with the new movie coming to Disney Plus, like the hidden cameo in Allison's house, but that will have to wait until next Halloween. Until then, have a wonderful day.